Warning, this video contains team selection and captain choices which some viewers may find offensive.
Hey guys, and welcome back finally to FPL TV. My apologies for being so quiet on the channel over the last 2 weeks, but as you probably heard from my voice in the previous video, I've been struggling with a chest infection. Following that, as you all know by now, there's also been some very confusing developments with regards to fixtures and FPL the last few weeks. First, the Brighton game got postponed, then Game Week 7 got cancelled, as well as all the uncertainty surrounding Game Week 8 until a few days ago. So, as well as this giving me some much needed time to recover, I also wanted to get away from all the noise, all the speculation of what could happen. And now that we have a clearer picture of the FPL calendar, with Game Week 8 having 7 fixtures, I can finally get my head back into FPL. So let's first quickly see how my team performed back in Game Week 6, and then discuss my team for the upcoming Game Week 8. Sadly, it was a very poor one in Game Week 6, with my side returning a very underwhelming 39. Liverpool did keep a clean sheet against Wolves that week, and yet somehow the pain of having both Alexander-Arnold and Robertson continued, only returning 2 points between them, with Trent getting subbed off before 60 minutes and Robertson not even starting. No doubt a very harsh outcome. Elsewhere, with a 1-pointer from Brighton Sanchez in goal, that's incredibly now 6 consecutive 1-pointers from my goalkeepers this season. Pascal Gross was my free transfer in, and he did at least bag an assist. But considering I debated over buying his teammate Trossard instead that week who scored 12, well, not the best outcome either. Erling Haaland did score again as my captain, but not enough to salvage a very poor week from the rest of my squad. It was a drop of 500,000 places down to 2.5 million, so disappointing, but considering I was ranked at nearly 4 million just 2 game weeks before, well, that's still a bit of progress overall, I guess. So let's move on to Game Week 8 now, and discuss my team for the imminent Game Week deadline. During the cancelled Game Week 7, with a free transfer available before that deadline, I made the move of the now injured Robertson to Kieran Trippier. A move that I knew I'd be happy with for the longer term now, regardless of how the cancellations panned out. However, with the news now that only 7 games will go ahead this weekend in Game Week 8, that still leaves me with the likes of Salah, Trent, Pascal Gross and Reece James all out, as well as notably leaving me with no goalkeeper, considering Sanchez blanks as well, and Iverson on my bench is still behind Ward in the pecking order. It's also left me with the likes of Dewsbury Hall in my 11, and also Villa's Cameron Archer, who's not even a starter, so a pretty undesirable situation and likely only 8 players. For this reason, I've chose to activate the wildcard this week. I had considered making 2 transfers, taking a -4 hit, and then getting through the game week with just 10 players, but considering I was pretty set on wildcarding in Game Week 9 anyway, I decided to simply bring that 1 week forward. It also allows me to field a full 11 this week with no hits obviously, and in fairness, the wildcard squad I put together this week isn't too dissimilar to what it could have been in Game Week 9 anyway. So with all that considered and my hand kind of forced, I've chosen to hit the button now. So let's look at how the new team lines up. Both Mitrovic and Tony come in up front, and providing there's no injuries to either, I expect they could both remain in my side until the World Cup. Both talisman, both with penalties, both 90-minute men with no fears of rotation, trustworthy long-term options in my opinion. Of course, losing Gabriel Jesus for Tony this week could of course come back to hurt, but wildcarding this week was always going to have some difficulties, and I've got to keep the longer term in mind. Over the next 5 game weeks, Arsenal face Tottenham, Liverpool, and have a blank game week in 12. So although I'd have liked to have kept Jesus until next game week, he's going to have to make way a game week earlier than desired, and hopefully Tony can deliver over the next 5 in the meantime. In terms of midfield, De Bruyne comes in to replace Mo Salah, who of course blanks this game week. It was a big decision between which premium to include here this week between Son, Kane and De Bruyne, but considering Son is out of form and not guaranteed of starting against Leicester, and with Kane, well I've already got Mitrovic and Tony here who I trust as cheaper forward options, so therefore De Bruyne seemed the more sensible option for me. Owning De Bruyne also means he remains a very nice placeholder if and when I want to bring Mo Salah back into my side. And notably, in Game Week 12, when Manchester City blank, that could be the perfect time to simply switch De Bruyne back to Mo Salah, who then boasts some very nice fixtures of his own. James Maddison also comes into my side, and this one is much more of a fixture play, as from Game Week 9 onwards, Leicester's fixtures look very favourable, facing Forest, Bournemouth, Palace and Leeds in the next 5 game weeks. Granted, his fixture this week away to Spurs is by no means ideal, and Leicester in general are in horrendous form, so no doubt a questionable pick. Maddison's benefit here is simply that he actually has a fixture this game week, unlike the likes of Zaha or Diaz around this price point that don't. Despite Leicester's very poor form overall though, I still trust Maddison individually as an FPL option, who I do consider to be fairly fixture-proof. If the Foxes are going to score, then he has a very high chance of being involved in my opinion. And if by some chance he should get anything against Spurs here, then he'll no doubt become an even more popular option for those wildcarding in Game Week 9 during the break, thus putting me ahead of the curve on his good fixtures. Regardless of how he gets on against Tottenham though, given Leicester's upcoming fixtures, I am determined to hold on to him for the long term here, but let's see how the next 2 or 3 game weeks go first and assess from there. At the very least, he's an easy route to Zaha in future if needs be. Another key decision on this wildcard was to either include Wilfried Zaha or instead keep Alexander-Arnold, both of which blank this game week anyway. Buying Zaha and simply benching him this week was a consideration, because Crystal Palace's long-term fixtures all the way until the World Cup do look excellent. But notably, following this blank game week, he does have a difficult fixture against Chelsea first, and will also be facing Reece James there, who's also in my squad. Alexander-Arnold, meanwhile, has Brighton at home next week, which, without their manager Potter now, could be a more favourable fixture, and does spare me from having that conflict of interest of Zaha and Reece James. In all honesty, I'm just not quite convinced yet that going without Trent is the correct play. So I'm going to give him that Brighton at home fixture, I think. Hopefully roll the transfer in Game Week 9, and then I can always use 2 free transfers in Game Week 10 to make this switch and bring Zaha in. Zaha faces Leeds at home in Game Week 10, whilst Trent is then away to Arsenal. So that could be the optimal time to make the switch, depending on how Game Week 9 goes. So that's how my wildcard team currently lines up for Game Week 8, with Reece James and Trent ready to come back in from Game Week 9 onwards. Granted, it's not the strongest team for this game week specifically, and of course I'd love to take a punt on a Tottenham asset at home to Leicester this week, but like I said before, I'm doing my best to consider the longer term here as well, and don't want to take too many punts on players that I don't want from next game week onwards. Am I expecting huge things from this team this week? Well, certainly not, but it has saved me from taking hits this week and going into the game week without a full 11. With this squad, I've also looked at the future game weeks ahead, and I have to say I'm pretty happy with how the team is set up. The plan will now be to roll the transfer in Game Week 9, so hopefully, fingers crossed, no injuries during the internationals, and that'll then give me a lot of flexibility on how to proceed in Game Week 10 onwards. Starting the likes of Neco Williams this week on a wild card is certainly questionable, especially considering I do have Andreas and Mitrovic playing against him this week. But at 4 million, in my opinion, there's still no better defensive option here, and amongst defenders, his attacking underlying numbers are still outstanding. I could look at another 4 million option like West Ham's Emerson, but I'm simply not convinced on him going forward. I've also looked at opting for Ivan Perisic instead of Alexander-Arnold this week to give me coverage of that Tottenham-Leicester fixture and then playing him over Neco Williams. But sadly there's no guarantees that Perisic starts this week, and longer term I can see him being a bit of a headache with regards to rotation. Neco Williams this week can therefore simply be my insurance policy. In the unlikely event that Mitrovic and Andreas let me down, hopefully Williams can then in turn bring home a clean sheet. And in any case, he is showing more goal threat than almost any other defender, so always has that chance of scoring against the club he played for last season. For the captaincy this week for me, that will stay with Erling Haaland, who, although away to Wolves in an early kickoff certainly isn't a banker, is still probably the strongest option in my squad currently. Had I gone for Harry Kane in this wildcard, well, he'd have been a very strong consideration against Leicester to jump up the rankings, even more so given his superb record against the Foxes. But with no Harry Kane here, Haaland keeps the armband. Considering his incredible goal-scoring form of late anyway, a fairly straightforward decision. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and if so, be sure to leave a like and get subscribed to FPL TV. Good luck to you all for Game Week 8, FPL responsibly, and I'll catch you all very soon.